Hello, everybody. My name is J.A. Süss, and welcome to First Fridays in the Exchange. This is the Art Talk. In fact, this is the last Art Talk of the summer, and it is called A Changing Surface as Art. Our next talk is going to be on September 2nd. That's in the middle of the Labor Day weekend. But for now, tonight, there are a whole bunch of art events, open galleries, and food art to partake of on our First Fridays. Our What's On calendar is available on our website at www.firstfridayswinnipeg.org. And I have to say, I was excited to see all the things that are open tonight. And some things will still be open after this talk if you are listening live. So some places are open till 8, some till 9, some start at 9, some are open till 10. And a few places will still require a mask, like the Martha Street Studio. And some vendors will probably themselves still be wearing masks as they are owner-operator owned businesses, and can't afford to get sick. Anyway, so I'm just going to do a bit of a land acknowledgement and highlight some of the things going on tonight after that. So if you want to read along on the screen, if you can see it, you're more than welcome to do that wherever you are. First Fridays was started to encourage people to come to the Exchange District in Winnipeg. Acknowledge that the Exchange District is located within Treaty 1 territory, which is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Nehiyaw, Ojibwe, Dakota, Dene, and Métis people. Our water here in Winnipeg has been taken from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation on Treaty 3 territory. And some of our hydroelectric power comes from hydroelectric dam projects in Treaty 5 territory. We, here at First Fridays, would like to work toward greater understanding and acting on how to decolonize art, artistic practice, public discourse, and ourselves. I have a further thing to say, and that is that we humbly acknowledge the Indigenous peoples' inclusive legacies and traditions, customs, knowledges, and languages. So here we are in the chat on the First Fridays website, but maybe you're watching from YouTube. We'd encourage you to participate with us. Type questions into the chat. There's a little box on the First Fridays website that says join our chat. So you can click that. And you can also sign into YouTube, Google, or Gmail with your account name and password. And watch us on YouTube and participate and drop your comments into the chat. And our wonderful broadcasting partner, Collective Broadcast, has sent us the wonderful Aaron, who will pass these questions on to us. So thanks, Aaron. So just again, our First Fridays website is www.firstfridayswinnipeg.org. Just want to highlight a few of the events that are happening around town. And that is at the Artist Run Center called Ace Art until 8 p.m. tonight. There is a multimedia exhibition from Zahra Basseri, who's an Iranian-Canadian artist, and it is called Tell All the Truth, but Tell It Slant. And there's the Nonsuch Brewing Company, which is another one of our First Fridays partners, has a guest sous chef named Allie Simpson, who is taking over the kitchen for a one-time only menu in the tap room. That's exciting. I love that kind of food event idea. At Urban Shaman Contemporary Original Art Gallery tonight at 290 McDermott Avenue on the second floor. I have an opening reception for a show in English. It's called Many Things Appear. I'm going to try to read the Arabic script of the Inuktitut, which is Alakajut. It's work by circumpolar artists, someone from Norway, from Tuktoyaktuk, Northwest Territories, and someone from Alaska. So that's kind of an exciting idea of just making, circle at the top of the globe and calling that common territory. So It's kind of a global warming idea. Anyways, so here we have also at Martha Street Studio, also known as the Manitoba Printmakers Association. They have an opening reception until 8 tonight, and that's where masks are required. There's a solo exhibition there you could check out. King Street's Utopia has a dance show that starts at 8 and the doors open at 7:30 immediately after this talk. And it's a free dance event focusing on the potential for ecstatic expression. So if you are missing some ecstatic expression and want to shake out your post-pandemic things that you want to shake out of you got to shake $15 out of your pocket to get in before you start the rest of it. Also, there's some vintage sellers called Vantage Vintage at 70 Albert Street, and they had they were joined by someone else, so it's they had a guest vintage curator this month, so there'll be some exciting stuff there. Also on Albert Street at 68 is a plant lab botanical design, and they have a DJ there tonight and a raffle, so you can get a bunch of plant things and bonsai starter kit as well. If you are into the bonsai, type it into the chat. Practice typing in questions for our artists. And the prize will be picked up tomorrow. Just want to say again, the name of our talk tonight is called A Changing Surface as Art. And after our talk, there will be a presentation in the Art Space lobby in the elevator, and we'll get our guests to talk about that a little bit more. But if you're tucking things into your schedule for what to do after this talk, you could go to Artspace, and that'll be awesome. All right, I'd just like to introduce our two artists today. And we have Kelly Campbell and Eric Plamondon. And I'll just start I'll just read your bios out because it's pretty interesting. So Kelly Campbell was born in Pumajikwatuk, Mi'kma'ki, also known as Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and currently lives in Winnipeg within Anishinaabeg, Dene, Cree, Dakota, and Métis traditional territory. They and their ancestors are white Canadian settlers of Scottish, Irish, and Swedish heritage. They were redacted, at birth and belatedly reassigned boyish not a girl 20 some odd years later. Kelly's work uses humor, play, and interactivity to engage the viewer, who is asked to collaborate in complicating dominant narratives of gender, sexuality, taste, class, labor, leisure, emotion, and virtue. With skills in a wide range of mediums, including sculpture, painting, printmaking, digital design, and fiber work, projects often take shape based on which medium the artist is currently obsessed with. And our other guest is similarly multi-talented and multi-genre expert. Winnipeg-based artist and arts administrator Eric Plamodo is focused on the relationship between art, audience, and space. He's a valued arts administrator, now at the helm of the cultural hub Artspace. Eric maintains his own art practice by being engaged in various art projects or by creating them himself. His multidisciplinary practice includes cinema and films, theater, improv, visual arts, and literary arts. And it is capacity in each of these disciplines that elevates his art as he is driven to participate in new art experiences and see how cross-contamination can elevate and define Manitoba's artistic offerings. He often taps into his bilingualism, French and English, and the prism of homosexuality to deliver narratives from underrepresented and undervalued minorities. Eric shares and embraces his Métis heritage. Welcome, both of you, to the first Friday's Talk of August 2022. Hello.
Hello. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Let's just jump right in, Kelly, and let's talk about some of your past work as a printmaker and artist.
Okay.
So I found out a bunch of things about you, and that is that I knew you were a musician and I knew you were a printmaker, but I didn't really know that you also kind of have done like, um, I guess they're not necessarily like political illustrations, but like newspaper illustrations that go with articles. So like storytelling in a like a comic or like a one piece poster is like a really big part of that. So you've been doing that for quite a while already. Can you talk about some of your other artistic and history as a printmaker?
Well, it all started at the well, I think I need to attribute lots of my history as a printmaker to Martha Street Studio, because I believe it was 2013 that 2012 and 2013 perhaps that I did the youth outreach and incubator program. And I did those in my early 20s before I went to art school. And it was kind of what got me more into doing art in like a serious way or taking myself more seriously as an artist. So those programs are really amazing. And I would encourage any like young people, and their definition of youth is pretty broad. Like if you don't have an art degree, they'll basically take you into the youth printmaking program. So yeah, youth outreach program and incubator. If you are interested in printmaking, I highly recommend taking them because the youth outreach program, it sort of allows you to sample all the different kinds of printmaking you can do at Martha Street. So it's twice a week for I think 3 months. And so you do one project in every medium they can do there, which is like screen printing and then relief printing, etching, and some collagraph. So there's like the upstairs with the screen printing setup and the downstairs with the presses where you do sort of like that's where you do the relief and the intaglio. And then
I'm just going to jump in. Sorry, I just have I'm just going to jump in with a point of like a admin little point. And then that is that on our website, the YouTube link above the video was incorrect, but it's been fixed. So if people want to refresh the page and then join the chat, they'll be able to. So if that was a problem for you before, it has now been fixed. And also if you want to join the chat and ask Kelly or Eric any questions, join through YouTube, Google account, or Gmail. Sorry about that, Kelly. Will you keep going about the Martha Street amazingness?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so once you complete youth outreach program, you're able to apply for incubator. And it's a really simple application. Like I wouldn't let that intimidate you at all. You just kind of explain, you can pick a type of printmaking that you like the most that you tried during youth outreach and sort of do a longer project that you would do over 2 to 3 months. And you have meetings with mentors who can kind of help you develop your project and give you feedback. So the print that was showing before, Dead Rat, is the one that I did in 2013 during that incubator program, which it's a really big dry points, which I think it's about 12 by 24 or like a foot by like 3 feet or a couple feet by 3 feet. I wouldn't recommend doing a dry point that big ever again, but I did do it because it's like, I don't know how technical I would want to get into how printmaking actually works, but with lots of kinds of etching, you will start with a metal plate and then you'll cover it with the ground and then you'll etch into the ground and remove the ground. And then you take that metal plate and you put it in a bath of acid and the acid eats away wherever there is no resist ground. Dry point, it's still etching, but the way that it works is you use any kind of sharp object like a nail and you scratch your design into a piece of plexiglass. but it's not actually the indentation that holds the ink. It's when you scratch it, these little burrs come up and those things hold onto the ink. So you can actually only get about 4 or 5 prints out of a dry point, because after a while, those little burrs that are sticking up, flattened down by the pressure of the press. And also it takes just a long time to ink, because the way you ink intaglio or etching plates is, or dry point plates, is you sort of take the ink and smear it on the surface, and then you take a cloth and you like sort of slowly remove everything that is not a line. So all of the white space that you see in that image, you have to use like a cheesecloth to sort of like painstakingly wipe away this super thick ink. And then after I did that, chine collé, which is means it's like gluing paper onto your paper. So you sort of take some paper and put glue on it, and then you can put it in layers, and you put it through the press and it glues it to the paper. And also I painted the red on the flower. So it was a super time-consuming project, but I really enjoyed doing it. And then I was like, I think I'll go to art school. So I'd say the program is super successful. And just being able to do a big project like that can give you confidence to, you know, become an artist if you want to, or that doesn't have to be the goal, but in some cases it is. So.
And what other, can you talk about other projects that came out of your connection at the Martha Street studio?
Oh yeah. So after I graduated from university in 2017. And then after I graduated, I did an internship there in the summer of 2018. So during that time, I made another print that I think you'll have on your slides. It's the 2 birds sitting on a hill. It's called A Short Break on a Long Journey. And I sort of developed a way of printing with multiple colors so I could teach a class on that. So I do teach that. I've taught it, I think, 3 times now. So that was really awesome. And I kind of wasn't expecting that to come out of the internship. So I was like very, very happy about that. And it's really like, it was like, since I started going there, it was like my dream to like teach a class there. So I was really happy when that was offered. So this, the one that you see now, the 2 birds sort of sitting on this little island, that's a relief print. And it's a reductive relief print. So what that means is that I start out with my plate, which is just a plain piece of linoleum, like flooring linoleum is what we use at the studio. And we cut it up into like little sizes. So this is an 8x10. And then what you do is you use only one plate. So you go from your lightest to your darkest color. So for instance, in this one, there's no white. So I just printed the whole thing yellow. And then I would remove whatever I want to stay yellow. So like the sun, and then I print again with like, and then I remove whatever, you know, if it's the water, I remove everything but, oh, sorry, I'm not explaining this super well. It's actually kind of difficult to explain with words. And even in the class, it takes a while to be like I don't, like it takes you have to kind of do it to sort of understand, but basically just between every layer, you go back and you remove a little bit more material to like reveal more of the image. And that's how you do the multi-color print process with different layers.
Well, sounds pretty complex.
Yeah, there's like a registration system you kind of have to learn as well, so they actually line up with each other.
Okay, I'm looking at the bird on a skateboard, and this seems to be like a kind of a theme for you. I'm going to talk about that a bit.
Yeah, the bird on the bronze bird on a skateboard, I actually made before that print. So I think that is 2016 and the print was 2018. So this little bird is like a character I have drawn over and over and over again. And he's part of this little world that I have constructed in my mind. And it only really exists in like bird drawings and the times that I've told people the story. But he has like an epic journey. he lives like, you know, millions of years in the future after all the humans are gone from the earth, in this sort of like weird society of birds. And it's kind of a way to, that story in that universe is a way to sort of think about what other intelligent creatures who would like have the ability to, I mean, birds are intelligent as they are, but I mean, if they had, and I think they could develop in this world, in my mind, they have developed like the ability to sort of be self-reflective and also to like engage in archaeology and look at the past societies that have lived on the earth. So it's sort of a way of like taking these birds that supposedly live a million years in the future and having them like look back on human society and sort of like interpret and misinterpret lots of things and think about, oh, what would they think of us and what would they think our values were, and like how would they blend that with their own like ways of being as a bird. So if that makes sense.
Maybe they'd take better care of their skateboards.
Do they? I don't know. I guess they don't have to use them as much because they can fly.
Yeah.
That's
Like,
why,
hey, do you want to go low on the ground?
that's the thing. Is
Yeah,
that
whoa.
the thing about the skateboard is that like this bird is like using a skateboard, which is like seems silly because he's a bird. It's like, why would you use a skateboard? You can literally fly. So that's sort of part of the thing of him and his society and his culture looking back on humans and like picking parts that they thought were cool and you know, taking them and using them even though they're like kind of don't really make sense to use, because I think people do that a lot. And so I think it's like a sort of maybe more funny and ridiculous extreme way of looking at the way that people sort of might do that, or look back and even take an idea and like misinterpret it based on, you know, the current way of thinking or what they want it to be.
Mhm.
That's why he
Well,
means a skateboard and a backpack and a little hat.
I was noticing on your website, which is kellycampbell.wordpress, that this idea has been permanently tattooed on somebody.
It has.
So like stick and poke is an Eric on you. No. We actually see the person. So we do have a slide for that, which is another tattoo, a person.
Yeah, so a friend of mine, there she is. She asked me for a bird tattoo, and I was like, oh, I'm so
This bird.
yeah, because we went to school together, and so she would see me drawing this bird like on all my notes and just everything. I drew him like a lot. And then like in my sketchbooks, he's always like floating around on an inner tube and like doing stuff. So she asked to have him tattooed on her arm. And yeah, I'm sort of an amateur tattooist. I don't know how to use a gun, so this is stick and poke or hand poked if you're fancy. I really like doing tattoos. I've heard people say that or tell me that like they can be like medicine for people. Yeah, so I kind of like I have for a while. I wanted to become a tattoo artist, but at the same time I also can see how like it's actually a quite personal thing to give someone a tattoo, like physically and emotionally, and especially depending on where it is on their body. And so it's kind of nice to have it be a more like the people who get tattoos from me like are people who are like really special to me usually. And they usually have to ask me about like 20 times until I like put them in the calendar. So I don't know. I think it's kind of like, and I think there's another slide with some tattoos as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say on your on some of the other ones, what one thing I really like about the other tattoos is just how it kind of is, you know, takes you to the, especially the moon one. I'm a big moon fan, so like it just is like, you know, I just like I look into it and I want to like just kind of, you know, be there, and it's kind of like a little landscape. And I also like the hedgehog. Hell no.
Yeah, like so. Yeah, tattoos are fun too, because a lot of the time when I do them for people, they'll sort of have an idea. Sometimes they'll be like, do the skateboarding bird. But often they'll have an idea and not ask you to draw it for them. So these ones were both a person had an idea or like showed me a picture and we're like, can you do something like this? And I would be like, sure. And the one on the right is from a bunch that I did at there's like a Grassy Narrows women's gathering that I would go to sometimes as a helper, and the person who that year the theme was tattoos, and the person who was supposed to go had like an emergency on their land where they had to stay and like protect these turtles from I can't remember if it was loggers or, but there was a turtle situation and they couldn't come. So I sort of stepped in and did a bunch of tattoos for people on that weekend. So that's what the one on the right is from. And that was, it was like kind of, it's quite tiring to do tattoos all day for like 2 days in a row, but it was like really nice. Like that's sort of where I got the, when I say like, it's so personal and it's like most of the people, I think a few people paid me, but like I sort of told folks like, you don't have to pay me. You can give me a gift or something if you want. So to me, it's like more, and I got this really cool, like, I don't know, like a bag, like a quilted bag with like a star blanket on it. And to me, like somebody giving me something that they made or, you know, it's not folks who will just come in with a wad of cash and get whatever they want. Like it's people who kind of really appreciate what you're doing and give something back to you. Like that's really cool to me, like because tattoos are kind of so much work that like it's more like you form a relationship through giving people tattoos, and so that sort of changed my perspective a little bit on like, you know, the way people sort of perceive or the way I perceive tattooing, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to, you know, speaking of relationship, just move to the part of the talk where we talk about how you came to be at Artspace. And I'm wondering, I know that your title is the summer intern at Artspace right now. So I just want to turn to Eric a bit to talk about what the Artspace mentorship is. Let's just talk about the mentorship for a while.
Sure. And yeah, we always kind of struggle with titles in the sense that Kelly is my colleague for the summer and has been invited to transform space with art. So it's in the title of the organization, Art Space, but I feel that often enough, we don't do enough of transformation of space through art. And so when I started at Artspace, that philosophy and that mindset kept sort of like playing in my head of we have over 5,000 square meters of building space, and a lot of creation happens through the democratization of the tools of creation. But it doesn't always have to be behind doors. It can be in the hallways. It can be in the stairwells. It can be in the elevators, and it can be on the outside of the building. And that was always very, very interesting to me. And when I saw this email come across my inbox from the government of Canada saying, hey, not-for-profits, have you considered hiring a student over the summer and getting some stuff done? I was like, maybe this is an opportunity here to hire a visual art student or a visual art youth. And as Kelly sort of described, we use a very loose understanding of what youth is, but essentially sort of give an opportunity, which is rare, I think, to hire someone to strictly do art and go through the process from the beginning, which means there is nothing, to the completed process, and to actually be paid throughout, and to be mentored and helped and assisted and supported throughout, which means when Kelly started, we saw the portfolio like you just showed to everyone who's watching the talk, and we were like, yeah, they're freaking kick-ass, let's get them in the building to do something. But the something, we didn't know what it was. So Kelly has time to sit in the various spaces of Artspace in the community and conceive and research a project, and then figure out what space they want to transform. And then we help and assist in figuring out what's the process. I say that Kelly did most of it because they're the print expert amongst the group that is at Artspace, but to sort of like provoke maybe some thoughts on what the project is, what the scope of the project is, what you can do in the time, and what you can do with the very limited materials budget that we have. So that's kind of the idea, and we've been doing this for 5 summers now. What's behind me was created last summer by Tomiko Chase Kavanaugh, and every year this bar of impact of what these youth are creating is just blowing my mind and making the space that much better for everyone who comes here.
So it seems like it's more of a residency than a summer intern. So there's like a combination of like learning, but also making and having a final product. Kelly, I'd like you to talk a little.
You're dead on, and we throw the term residency often, and often it's like residency is like, here's the space and let us know when you're done and maybe show something. And internship feels like, oh, okay, we will help and teach you, and it's like it's somewhere in between those two things. And that often also I feel like, and I hate to use the word, but one of the things that we're trying to also give as a learned experience and as an experience is that Artspace and the tenants of become a bit like the client. So there is that sort of like, well, what do we need and how do we know that the people in the building use the building? So it's not like walking in the gallery and go hang whatever art that you have. There is that relationship of, okay, what are the stress points and what are the use points in the building, which meant sometimes that Kelly had to put their art up at times that nobody was using the elevator, which is a hard time to sort of figure out. But that too is a learning process that hopefully can parlay into future employment and to future opportunities for the visual artists.
So let's look at the place where the location you'd mentioned, the elevator. So Artspace has these gates in the lobby and a plaque in the lobby. And can you talk a little bit about sort of this as a starting point for thinking about where you were going to make some art in the building?
Yes, I can. So I was sort of thinking about like, when I first submitted my proposal to Eric and Mari, who is the administrative assistant here, it was like, I think like 8 pages long and had like, like 25 projects on it. I was like, I can do this or this or this or this. So this was yeah, just to give a bit of a context, like it was very, and the one that I ended up doing, I think it had like, you know, this much space of the proposal. So I was kind of, but for the project that we did go with, which was the prints in the elevator, I wanted to use some of the old design features that were around from the original construction of the building, which is this elevator cage and then the ceiling tiles. And I was looking at this sort of old didactic plaque that is next to, it's like glued to the elevator cages. And I think there's one on every floor pretty much. But it kind of, like it tells you about like the history, but in this way that is kind of like, okay, so we know it was the first Richardson Romanesque warehouse and was originally a dry goods warehouse. We know who owned it and like, oh, here's where it maybe came from, and then sort of talking about the design features. But I feel like this, you know, the sweeping peacock scrolls and the acorn leaf and the round lozenges and the twists and the woven strips and whatnot. And to me, it's kind of missing sort of historical context. And I do find that a lot of the wording used in written attempts to sort of explain the history of the exchange or to sort of draw people into the exchange kind of romanticizes this early era of development and like the buildings that were built and all of the sort of, you know, the cool looking elevator cages and the cool looking ceiling tiles, without sort of addressing like what was the real cost of all this development that and making these, you know, beautiful buildings that we now get to enjoy. So the idea was to kind of take those design elements and incorporate them into the design of the artwork. So what I did was I took these really big pieces of like craft paper and I taped them to the ceiling tile. I got on a really tall ladder and I was afraid, and I taped them to the ceiling tiles and they did these rubbings of the ceiling tiles and then also the elevator cage and just the different, like the scrolls. And then also on here, you can kind of see in the middle, there's those little sort of squiggles coming up from the center of the tile. So those were the squiggles I ended up using to make the net design in the print. So I sort of I had done rubbings of the ceiling with this sort of very soft graphite, like a 4B or something like that. So I could then sort of take them and flip them over and just trace them right onto the linoleum to make a sort of, so I could directly transfer like the design from the roof to the linoleum without distorting it too much. And it was the same thing for the little scrolls. I sort of made them into waves to represent water. And the idea behind taking those and making it into this imagery that's around fish and nets and water is that I wanted to provide an entry point for folks to learn about the different hydro projects that provide our electricity. And folks listening may not know, but the Art Space building was finished construction in 1906. And then it was used as a warehouse for, I don't know, 70 years. And then in the 80s, it was renovated and turned into Art Space, what it is today. So in 86, I think it was completed. And when we're looking at the history of hydroelectric dam development in Manitoba, it actually follows within, you know, like a few years, sort of the trajectory. You can see how it sort of affects the sort of cultural industries like in Winnipeg. So though the fish in the elevator are whitefish, and they represent the fish from a lake called South Indian Lake. And in the 60s, Hydro sort of decided on their own without consulting anyone that they were going to start using it as a reservoir battery for the hydroelectric dams that they plan to construct on the Nelson River. And excuse me, but I just wanted to go back earlier to 1906 or 1902, when the first hydro dams were constructed. And they were sort of constructed on the Saskatchewan River, which runs, it's much more southern. And so the reason that those were the first ones constructed is because it's the closest to Winnipeg, which is where the greatest demand for power was. So then fast forward to the 60s, and the hydro folks are like, all right, we want to develop more. We know there's going to be more demand for power. So their plan was to use South Indian Lake as a reservoir battery and divert the Churchill River. So South Indian Lake is a tributary to the Churchill River. So the project is called the Churchill River Diversion. And what it essentially means is that the Churchill River was all the water that would normally flow out of South Indian Lake into the Churchill River was stopped and turned around and sent to the Nelson River, which is sort of more southern. So if we have the three rivers we're talking about, we have the Churchill River, which is the most northern river and empties out near Churchill. And then we have the Nelson River, which is sort of in the middle. And then those are both, but they're still both very far north. And then sort of the Saskatchewan River, which is way farther south and closer to Winnipeg. So I found this sort of old hydro brochure that was talking about their priorities when they were building, they were planning on constructing this dam. And in their priorities, it says, I think there's only, 3 or 4, but the first priority was to build the dam. And then the second priority was to build like a high-speed power line to Winnipeg. So it was always intended to benefit people in the South. And there wasn't really much thought given to how it would benefit people in the North, or how it would really actually kind of ruin lots of people's lives. And so when the Churchill River diversion was put into effect, initially, the water levels in South Indian Lake were raised by 25 feet, which amounts to thousands of square kilometers of land. And the folks that lived there had to be relocated. And there was also a fishery established in South Indian Lake in the 40s that predominantly fished whitefish. And in present day, I'm not sure exactly where it's at, but it's declined 90% since even before, the 60s. Honestly, most of the decline happened in the 90s to the 2000s. So it's it's very complicated once you start to get going. It's hard to explain the story. I'm going to keep going for a little bit before I try to take a break. But so basically, the lake was flooded. Folks were moved before the lake was flooded. There was like consultation, but what that meant was that basically Hydro came in, and they had a town hall meeting, and they were like, so we're doing this, what do you think about it? And then you can watch even, there's archival footage in some of the films that I listed when I emailed to you, Süss, of folks standing up and talking about what they thought about it and how they were like, please don't do this. Like, no, like, we don't want you to do this. Like, we want to be able to be self-sufficient. Because another thing about South Indian Lake is that before the Churchill River diversion, it had 4 or 5 times the average income of other similar communities in the North due to the abundance of the lake. So it was like a very, very hopping lake for fish. They loved it there. And there's people who tell stories of going fishing like the day after, or like, shortly after, and finding fish with their bellies full of pine needles because they eat clams from the bottom of the river or the lake. And so they were trying to sort of find their food and sort of pecking about on the bottom of the lake and just getting pine needles. And that is that can kill them because they can't digest pine needles. They've never come into contact with pine needles before.
I'm just going to ask, I've just got links for both of those films that you mentioned. And so I've just dropped them into the chat, and Aaron's going to put them into the comments. He said he added them to the chat. I also have like a graph, which was an article in the Thompson Citizen, written by Steve Ducharme. So Aaron's going to add that to the chat as well. And that gives like a real a graph of the decline of the South Indian Lake fishery. So so there's a story about that. You want to keep going for a little bit, Kelly?
Yeah, a couple more things. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the augmented flow program, because so the initial flooding was on a temporary permit, and that permit is still temporary actually after, how many years has it been? 50 plus years. And so they have this special augmented flow permit. So initially the agreement was that they would be able to do drawdowns of 2 feet at a time, which is like, taking the water out of the reservoir and pushing it through the dam to generate electricity. And then the augmented flow program, which is approved every year by, I think, an environmental official of the Manitoba government. I can't remember the exact position. Allows them to do drawdowns of 4 feet at a time, which is double. And so what this means is that the water is moving, it's moving in the opposite direction that it's naturally supposed to move. And it's moving way, 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 way more than it naturally would move on its own. And so it creates this shoreline erosion, which means that the water is very murky. Mercury begins to get into the water, and it's a lot harder to navigate in the summertime. In the wintertime, the ice is unstable, and so it can no longer be used as transportation. And people used to be able to drink the water in the river and the lake and swim in it. And now if you drink it, you'll get sick. If you swim in it, you'll get a rash. And this is just one community of the many hydro-affected communities in the north. And they each have their own unique story. But the general picture is like, it destroys the home of the animals that, the fish and the animals and the plants that have a very strong and intertwined connection with the communities that live near them. And so they're no longer able to be self-sufficient and to eat their traditional food, and are kind of forced into the wage economy. And yeah, this is like a tiny piece of the story, and to really understand it, I think you probably need to live it, which is why it's so important to watch those films so we can see people who have experienced this and who have lived it tell their stories. And also just that, like, that taking away that source of food and sustenance and culture. Many people have taken their own lives because they don't have hope for the future. And that started happening, immediately after the projects, and it continues to this day. And it's really sad and terrible.
I was thinking about what you had said about the wage economy, and it's definitely if you live for thousands and thousands of years on a sustenance economy, and you begin to have a business, which is a fishery, that's another thing, but trying to trade that for being a worker in a wage economy when the work isn't permanent and the work isn't long-term, the work isn't self-sustaining, it's not shared labor that benefits the community. It's a really big difference. We talked in another art talk about the changing surface of the water, and how it creates these apple core islands, and it just like erodes and erodes and erodes, so that you have like what used to be an island, and then it's like the shore of it comes in, and then our speaker from November or from December, Elder Dr. Ellen Cook, said that sometimes the islands just float away. So as the surface changes, it does this to the islands. But Kelly, will you tell us a little bit about what happens when another impact of the changing surface of the water and how it works throughout the winter?
Yeah, so there's a couple factors with how it works throughout the winter, which is well, people have used the river in the winter for a very long time as a mode of transportation. So normally, if the water level is here and your ice is freezing down below it, it's gonna keep getting thicker over the season as it freezes. But when you have drawdowns of 4 feet or more, what can happen? 4 feet, I think, a day or maybe a week. I'm not sure exactly the time period, but what happens is like you end up having sort of air pockets in the ice. So like this is where the ice is, and then we have a drawdown, and then the ice is down here, and you have another one, and then there's another layer down here. And it affects people in the sense that people have fallen into the river on their snowmobiles because you can't tell from above if the ice is solid or not. And you can't see those layers of ice underneath. So it's really hard to know if it's safe or not. And then it also affects beavers and muskrats who they actually will, in the wintertime, they're still active. They have their dams poke above the surface of the water, but the entrance is underneath. And they keep their food underwater. The beavers do, and they sometimes eat like fish, but they mostly eat foliage. And one of their favorite foods is willow, which comes back to the shoreline erosion because willow grows on the shoreline. So if there's no shoreline, there's no willows, and that's food for beavers, muskrats, and moose love willow as well. So, but going back to the water flow issues is, if you're a beaver and you don't really know about hydro and the water level's here, this is your dam, the water level's here, and then they do a few drawdown, they do a drawdown, and then suddenly the water level is below the level of your exit to the river, and then your food gets frozen into the ice. So they keep a larder of sticks under the water because it helps keep the food fresh for longer if it's underwater. So they'll collect, they'll eat their house around them, but they're sort of under the water and go down and grab stuff as they need it. So they can get basically locked out of the underwater system because of the drawdowns. And they kind of starve to death over the winter because they can't access their stores of food. And it kind of depends on the situation and where the dam is and lots of different things, but what it essentially has meant is that lots of beavers just kind of don't want to live on rivers that are affected by hydro anymore because they will die. So that messes up people's trap lines as well. And the same for moose.
We have a question. I'm just going to read it out here from Carlin Smythe. And Carlin says, is there some irony that in order to present your art piece, you're using an elevator powered by electricity?
Yeah, it's quite intentional actually, because the idea is that this water that we are controlling, or that is controlled by hydro through, I shouldn't say we because it's not a collective we, but that hydro is controlling through the dams in the dam system is, it's related to us because it's the water that is supposed to be, like, we are 90% water, and the water comes into us and it goes out of us. And we are using this system to raise and lower our bodies, which are bodies of water, up and down at the push of a button, and it's very similar to the way that hydro can press a button and lower the level of a lake by 4 feet or more, in a way that like it wasn't really like the water didn't really ever agree to doing that. but I think that there's a really interesting parallel there, and I'm not in any way trying to demonize elevators because they are obviously extremely needed. And this is one of the only, I think, fully accessible buildings in the Exchange that has an elevator and has an entrance elevator as well on the first floor. Which entrance is it? The
King Street
entrance.
West side.
There's so many buildings here that don't have very good access in that sense. So that is the connection there.
So when you're,
if I can too, because I think it's a great question, Carlin. And as this talk even started with this land acknowledgement and trying to bring awareness that we are situated on Treaty 1 right now, but a lot of the privileges and a lot of the assets that we get to utilize aren't just pulled from Treaty 1, they're pulled from Treaty 3, Treaty 5, and power being one of them. Like, we would never take away the elevator, and quite the opposite. We spend a lot of time and energy making sure it's functioning. But as people step into it and spend whatever time is needed to either go up or down, it's a great opportunity to sort of acknowledge that privilege and start that dialogue on what impact and what colonial structures existed in the past and exist in the present that allow us to have that privilege. So it's a way of sort of doing that land acknowledgement, that decolonization of spaces, but doing it through art and hopefully provoking conversation, provoking thought, dialogue, and a bit like Kelly's saying, inviting people to go hear the stories of the people from the North who speak so passionately about the impact that they've seen in their lifetime in the Northern community. Because even though it might seem geographically far, it's not, because the minute you push that button, you're linking yourself to what's happening in those communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we are like, people don't think of electricity in this way, but it's a physical thing. It's an excitation of molecules, and we are like physically directly connected to the water that is being, in my opinion, kind of misused and abused to create this power for, us and the American market. And, to add insult to injury, like, we've all seen the hydro murals around town. And to me, it's like, well, what's the other side of that story? Because to me, after doing this research, it's very clear that hydropower is not green energy. It might turn the water green, but it's not green energy. It's very destructive to the environment, and it's destructive to the people that live in that environment and have a right to do so.
Kelly, I notice, like, from looking at your work, that you do tend to be able to encapsulate a whole story into like one image. You've got like so many like comics as posters. You've done like political, and so I would like, I don't really have another name for this other than like a political cartoonist or like an illustrative journalist, kind of, you've got this history working for the Manitoban, creating images for a science department, making posters that really say what's going on in images on the poster. My brother and I were looking at at one of your posters. It's like, yes, the tools for sissies, where it like on each saw, it says saw. Anyways, but you have this this history of doing image using images as message. So I'm wondering if we can just have a look at what it looks like right now in the elevator, and you can talk a little bit about like what is really poignant to you about these images and how you've put them together in the elevator as we are kind of closing off our conversation.
So yeah, we can see it's actually missing one panel, but it doesn't matter. Because on the right, you can kind of see, or it's missing in the sense I didn't include it in the photograph. There's sort of like a cut paper thing of some water, but that's fine. So you can see the blue prints are supposed to be kind of what the water is like when it's healthy and it's supporting all this life. The white fish representing the fishery, and the sturgeon actually is a stencil I took from a project that the person you interviewed, Dr. Ellen Cook, was a part of. So the sturgeon stencil, which is their sturgeon marking project to sort of get people thinking about what's at the other end of the hydro line. And yeah, because also on the other side of the Churchill River diversion is the Churchill River, and sturgeons have used that to spawn for millions of years. They've been around since before the dinosaurs. So the sturgeons are also a very important fish that has survived, extinction level asteroids, but may not survive the presence of hydro. And then you see on the other side of the wall, the sort of after effects of the way that the water is managed, which is that it gets sort of a darker color, it becomes murky, and there are silver stickers that have been sort of attached and then printed on, and those represent the mercury that is in the water, because once it's in there, you can kind of remove mercury from land, but you can't really remove it from water. You just kind of have to wait for it to go away. And then there's also the sort of green slime, which is the algae, one of the only things that can live in the water. Because there's lots of decomposing, as you can see, all those sticks, lots of the decomposing plant material make the water like super nutrient rich, which might sound like a good thing, but it's actually it's sort of like Winnipeg, how it's overrun with agricultural runoff. Those extra fertilizers, once they accumulate in water, means that there will just be a ton of algae. And then the sticks, there's a lot of sticks because the people who fish will often call those hydrofish. So instead of catching fish in your net, now you catch little sticks and roots and whatever. Logs and sticks and roots. Yeah, so people call them hydrofish, so that's why they're there instead of the actual fish. And to be clear, this is like a symbolic and exaggerated story. Well, not exaggerated, but there are fish that do still live in the lakes and the riverways affected by hydro. They're just much less healthy, and they're much smaller, and there's far, far fewer of them. Hydro does have a program to reintroduce sturgeons, but at the same time, sturgeons need to live 20 years before they can reproduce. They only do it every 4 or 5 years. Hydro is putting baby sturgeons into this water that is not really healthy for them. And so some of them survive, but you can dump as many baby sturgeons, 2-year-old sturgeons as you want into the water, but that's not going to mean that the sturgeon population will recover if their habitat is poisoning them. So that's kind of the story of the different fish and items that you see in the elevator.
What do you, how do you hope that this impacts people as they're riding the elevator?
Well, I hope that they can see, I think they come in, and lots of people, I was also working on it while I was I needed more time and I couldn't really stop the elevator for long enough. So I was just working on it while people were using the elevator, and everybody loves the fish side and how beautiful it is and it looks cool. And then the other side, they're kind of huh, what's this? I didn't necessarily have time to explain the whole story to them. I barely do to you, and it's been an hour. But my hope is that people will see it and think like, wow, like, look at this beauty, and like, can we try to, like, you know, restore this, or be more thoughtful about, like, honestly, my ultimate hope would be that people would politically support Indigenous land defense and water defense struggles across the continent, because you often hear, I think, in the face of climate change, that, you know, your own personal sort of energy use and your trash creation doesn't, you know, is minuscule compared to corporations and compared to governments, and that the thing that's going to make the most difference is a political change. And to me, I would hope that this would sort of begin a process of more folks caring and working towards that political change, because I don't know, maybe that's hubristic of me to think that my art could inspire such a thing, but like, that's kind of what I would hope. Is that
one of my favorite, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because well, one of my initial projects I had also suggested, my super long list of suggestions was Shoal Lake 40 water fountain, because there's only one water fountain in the building on the main floor, and we know where the water comes from. And that was sort of, the conversation was like, well, we were having a meeting, Eric and I, and he was like, well, what about the electricity? Where does that come from? And I was like, I actually don't know. So to me, it's sort of to try to, for me personally, to try to be able to think about like acknowledging the land that like is essential to my life in more ways than just a land acknowledgement, because everything around us is land. Everything around us used to be alive, even if it doesn't seem that way. Everything around us comes from the earth. Like the building that we're sitting in was taken from the earth and rearranged to be a building. So I don't know. It's kind of like, it's sort of my way of trying to comprehend all of the different lands that contribute to my ability to have my life, if that makes sense. And maybe a more broad way than just like where I physically currently am, thinking about how did all this other stuff get here? You know, who brought it here, why, and where did it get taken from? And I think there's a reason that question is so hard to answer in our current lives, like in the way, in our material reality right now. And, you know, in Winnipeg, at least in Manitoba, I think that's really difficult. Like I couldn't, you know, where did the paper for this artist statement come from? Where was the tree cut down? I don't know. I have no idea. And I think that's, yeah. Robin Wall.
We have so many objects around us, you know, we're, you know, collecting objects and need this object and more objects and need more objects, you know, that we need so many objects that are, you know, it's not really, it would take more time to describe where all the objects around us in any given moment are from than to talk about anything else, have a conversation about anything else, really. You would just be constantly listing.
Yeah. And I just want to like, it calls to mind a passage from Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, where she goes to the store and she tries to say like, in her cultural tradition, when you take a material from nature, you thank the organism that gave it to you, if it's a plant or an animal, and you do like a bit of a ceremony to say thank you. And you know, you don't take something if it's not offered to you. Like if it's too hard for you to take, then maybe it's like not supposed to be taken right now. But then when you go to the store, and she was talking about buying pencils and paper, and she's like, well, all this stuff is already dead. So it's really hard for me to have a relationship with it, because by the time I come into contact with it, it's long dead. And it feels so disconnected from you know, the material reality of the land that we live on.
Mm.
What were you
So-
thinking?
Yeah, if I can answer quickly, in that I think the Canadian society, we're engaged in the process of being challenged to figure out what reconciliation means. I think we're in the process of also figuring out what decolonization of space means. I know the art sector is very much being properly challenged in what that means, because of a lot of our art structures were created at a time where being First Nations meant you did not have the same rights as everyone else on this shared territory. And for Artspace, which is owned by all Manitobans, by you, Süss, by Kelly, by me, and by probably the majority of people watching us right now, I go, we definitely have a role to play in sort of going, yeah, let's not get rid of the asset, but let's allow in narratives that predate maybe the 1900s and also actualize what's still happening today. So I am very hopeful that when people walk into the elevator, and even if they go, what the hell is this? They might like right up to my office on the 4th floor and go, Eric, what did you do in there? And I'm like, well, actually, Kelly did it. And let me tell you about it. And let me tell you where you're going to find out more. And as we involve more of these art narratives, hopefully it does incite people, encourage people, and make it less scary, make it less abnormal to engage in these conversations of right, where does power come from? Where does water come from? Where does our privilege come from? And then what do we do once you acquire that knowledge and that awareness?
Mm-hmm. And are we going to continue to, engage in the same way where we just consider like, oh, I guess we'll need another I'll need another electric tool for that, or I guess I'll need another electronic for that, or I guess I'm going to need more, power to my house for this, or I guess I'm going to need to like heat some more spaces, or there's a relationship as we consider our relationship to, where things come from, where things came from, when things started, maybe we'll have we'll reconsider our relationship to consumption and really to consider it as a relationship and as a connection to another place. That's just my little soapbox, though. I wondered if you would just take a moment and let's talk about what is happening for you later this evening at 8 o'clock. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so at 8 o'clock, we're having a little opening. There's going to be an elder coming to do a little blessing for the artwork, which is going to be great. So the blessing, I think, is happening at 8:20. So if you do come, the elevator will be out of commission for like 10 to 15 minutes then. Be aware, please. So if you want to catch that, you got to hightail it here before 8:20. I don't know if you want to speak more about that or not, but it's occurring. And then after, I'll be around and I'll take elevator rides with people. So you can just press the call button, go to the 4th floor, and we'll be up here. And it I can sort of answer people's questions if they have any, or just talk about what the work is about. And I think that's mostly what is happening. It's going till 9:30.
Kelly will be very concise. They only have the time between the 4th floor and the main floor to tell you about the art. But you can also come have a beer in this beautiful room, and we can chat as long as you so desire. And Artspace, reminder, like I love saying it, it's your building. So please feel free to come by anytime. And I'd love to make time to explain to you either Kelly's art or any of the other happenings in your building.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much both for talking about this artwork, for talking about the process. There's so many topics we didn't even get to tonight, but hopefully we'll have more opportunities. I dropped all the research links that you sent to me, Kelly, into the chat, and Erin put them into the chat on the YouTube stream. And I just want to say thanks again. I'm going to just close off by thanking our sponsors. I want to thank the Winnipeg Free Press for promoting this event through advertising. I also want to thank the Manitoba Arts Council for funding and the Winnipeg Arts Council. Thank you to Karen of First Fridays as well. And thanks to Collective Broadcast who sent us Aaron the Wonder Tech. So thanks again, Eric and Kelly and Eric for joining us. It's been really great. And for anyone, just like go down to Artspace right now if you're not already there and check it out, or check it out on another time. I just want to ask, like, what should people do if they want to come down to Artspace on another time and the door is locked?
So, little known secret, slowly the art community is unlocking and opening themselves more and more. So there's going to be increased opportunities, First Fridays being one of them, but also last Fridays of the month is the alleyways, which Artspace is participating. So there's a good chance if you show up at the door, it might be open.
Mm-hmm.
And film times as well.
Yeah, so if you, there's Cinematheque in the main lobby. So whenever they're showing something, and I think the box office is open like 6:30 to 8:30 or 9 on some days of the week. You might have to check the Cinematheque website because I don't have it off my head.
Tuesdays to Saturdays, but there's also a platform. There's Video Pool who has a gallery. So like I said, it's worth trying out. And if you don't succeed at Artspace, we're the creative campus of Winnipeg. So there's bound to be something in the neighborhood to do.
Yeah, just buy a ticket to a show at Cinematheque, and then you can call the elevator. You won't be able to go anywhere, and you'll have my experience of when I was sitting there gluing paper down for a while. It kind of has a sound. If you're
gluing paper at the elevator.
Well, the elevator has a sound. It has like a ventilation system that's always on. So it's like singing a little song.
Oh, nice. Well, thank you so much for sharing this story and for singing the elevator song. And I wish everyone like a really good First Friday and a really safe research journey as you check out some of these links on our YouTube channel. Feel free to tag us on Instagram or make a comment on our Facebook page if you want to. Again, to check out the other events, you can go to the First Fridays webpage, which is www.firstfridayswinnipeg.org, and all the events for today are on there. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a lovely and safe night.
Thank you.